multi-platform, multi-publisher gaming webcast. I am your host, William Big T Thrasher. With me, as always, is Michael Jolly Varhola and Brendan. He's over there too, Cass. And tonight we have a very, very special episode. It is a quantitative analysis of the game mechanics of economic simulation. But before we get into that heady topic, we do have some news for you. First and foremost, Brendan, what has been going on our website, d-infinity.net, this week?
Well, Chris Van Deelen is our most heavy. You're going to have to figure out a different way to carry that. I've never used any of these encumbrance systems. It's too much work. So Clint's is probably good. I'm sure I would use that one.
Excellent. Any other news from dinfinity.net?
Oh, well, I am working on a series of edited versions of the D-Infinity live show. I'm calling them D-Infinity Critical Hits. It's all the best snippets out of each of these episodes so that people can jump to the parts that they love the most. And those will be on Facebook, those will be on YouTube, and those will be on the dinfinity.net website. So that's fun. I'm working on that, and that's news as well.
So if you're looking for our bon mots or our mots justes, they're all going to be on Critical Hits.
Exactly.
All right. And Mike, what is going on with our co-publisher Skirmisher?
Well, first, you were breaking up when we started. What was your little opening poem? Was it about leering about something that I'd like to pound? What the hell were you talking about?
You see, that's one of the many things that Brendan has to go back and take out for Critical Hits. We'll have to do a fumbles webcast where it's just all the worst moments and the slip-ups and things.
Well, what is going on with Skirmisher? A couple of interesting things. One is cool but fairly routine, and the other is really, really cool and not routine enough. The first thing is that Will, your book, 100 Oddities for a Creepy Old House, just became an Electrum bestseller. Just in the last couple of days, I discovered it had become an Electrum bestseller. So out of its 170 or so publications, Skirmisher has 8 Electrum bestsellers, and one of them is now your 100 Oddities for a Creepy Old House. So congratulations. I think that set at 99 cents or something ridiculous. So anyone who has not already seen that can check it out, and I would encourage them to.
Well, it's not just me. You contributed to that, and so did Clint Staples.
Oh, did I? I'm always in such a fugue. I can never remember what I've actually contributed to.
It comes from the D-Infinity think tank. So all of the contributors from D-Infinity come together to share their best thoughts, their best oddities, and that's
you and Clint did 90% of what's in
Oh,
there.
that's true. It's mostly Will and Clint.
Yeah,
but they're
absolutely.
really useful. They're a really good universal supplement, and cheap as hell. They're 99 cents. You can get a candy bar that is less satisfying than...
And will make you fatter.
And will make you fatter than 100 Oddities for... wait, which one is this one? The
100
Creepy
Oddities
Old House.
for Creepy Old
Creepy
House.
Old House. That's the first one. That's the first one.
Yeah. You'll never look back 2 years after picking this up for 99 cents and say, fuck, if I had not picked up 100 Oddities for a Creepy Old House, I would not have diabetes today. You will never do that. On the other hand, if you spend it on that candy bar, you probably will. So buy Will's 100 Oddities for Creepy Old House, and you'll be tracking.
Save your life.
The other bit of news is more significant in a lot of ways. We have some friends in Houston, Todd and Allison Markello. Allison was actually part of our Skirmisher demo team at Comic Palooza last year, and both of them are going to be with us this year. Well, they run a game development studio called Ox and Fox Creations, and they have developed some really fascinating, innovative games.
Fox
and
and
one
Ox.
of the games they've developed is Cards and Quests, and this will show you just how motivated they are. This is a book sort of commensurate with what you'd find on a bookstore shelf, and this is just their prototype of their game. So they are that motivated that they actually will do a prototype that looks like this. But what Cards and Quests is it is a role-playing game that uses a standard 52 card deck of cards instead of dice.
Right.
So that mechanic gives players much, much more control over where they fail and where they succeed. It hedges things for them a bit, and it allows for a more epic style of play than a lot of role-play games that are out there. But it's just a fascinating game. It's well-structured. It's fun. They've done such a great job with it. Brendan and I met with them on Saturday, and they pitched us on this game. And as of this morning, we have all mutually agreed that Skirmisher is going to be publishing it. And it will be out if we can make it happen in time for Comic Palooza. We're fairly confident that we're going to have the PDF out in time for Comic Palooza, and we're going to push to have print copies out as well. And you know what? If they're not out in time for Comic Palooza, they'll be out pretty soon afterwards. So we're really excited. Skirmisher is now going to be publishing Ox and Fox Creations. Fox and Ox Creations. Fox and Ox Creations. Cards and Quests role-playing game, and we think people are really going to enjoy it because it just is doing some terrific things. It's got some great mechanics. So we will be talking a lot more about that and posting a lot more about it over the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that.
Yep, it's different. It's exciting. It's got a real compelling hook, and unlike some games that use different mechanics, there's no custom dice. Most people have a standard 52-card deck. So you can pick it up, check out the PDF. If you go to their website, I think you can check out their PDF for free if you're interested in taking a look at it, just getting the system reference documents, as I guess we can call them, for this particular system. It's a good game. It's a good game. They did a lot of really thoughtful stuff.
And people can check them out at Fox and Ox Creations. It's one word, foxandoxcreations.com. And whereas you can play this with a standard 52-card deck, they've also gone ahead and created 9 custom 52-card decks, one corresponding to each of the 8 elements that are reflected in the game, and which are the basis for the various powers and abilities that characters have. And then one for the GM. So 9 decks altogether. So you could just play the game with a standard poker deck, but on the other hand, they've actually got custom text on their cards which show which tell you specifically what each card does. So you could use the normal deck of cards and refer to the book, or you could use one of their custom decks and just be able to refer to the card. So very innovative, a lot of fun. And I think we were talking, Brendan, this would really adapt well to a LARP, wouldn't it?
It probably would, yeah. You only need to hang on to your custom deck of cards. You wouldn't need a rule book as reference. So
that's right.
I think it would probably work well as a LARP too, yeah.
So suffice it to say, we are excited, and we can tell they are too. And anyone who wants to check this out can go to their website or visit the Skirmisher Game Pavilion at Comic Palooza coming up on Memorial Day weekend.
Very cool. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is enough time for our main topic, a quantitative analysis of the game mechanics of economic simulation, which is a very fancy way of saying never trust a show description that gets posted on April 1st. Tonight, we will be talking about bait and switch and deception as tools in the GM's toolkit.
Mind you, I only realized this was the bait and switch thing earlier today.
Despite the fact that you were told months ago when we planned what we were going to do for April 1st.
I'll tell you what I tell my wife, Will. You say so much to me, I can't process it all. I just hit a level of sensory overload after a point. I'm trying so hard, and it's just like being bombarded. Think Superman being near a piece of kryptonite. That's exactly what it's like.
All right, Superman. So we're talking about bait and switch tonight, Will. We're talking about deception.
Bait and switch and deception is GM tools.
All right. So it's not economics at all. So very tricky.
It's going to be even trickier
as befits an April Fool.
Mm-hmm.
All I am prepared to discuss is economics and game systems. So that's going to really throw a monkey wrench in this show.
But see, Mike, I think that's the point. Honestly, I think the fact that you're prepared to talk about economics tonight on our live show, right? We prepare for each episode. I think it's a good point. You're prepared for one thing. the GM, in this case Will, delivered something else, and now you're going to have to think on your feet. That's the point.
Well, and that's a good point. Well put.
Yeah, if nothing else, that's what it's there for. I think there's far too much of optimization in tabletop role-playing games. If people know what kind of game they're playing, they will make the quote-unquote perfect character for that thing. If people know that they're playing a game where they're going to be survivors in a zombie apocalypse, well, they will make nothing but bikers and retired military and like SWAT team leaders and people who might very well have no difficulty surviving in that environment. So if you really,
I know actually.
yeah, oh yeah. So you can gauge their survivability then firsthand. But if you really want a good survival horror game and you know that you're not going to be playing with players who will automatically buy in and make real everyday people, you've got to say, oh, well, this game is about a bake sale, but a really exciting bake sale. So people will make homemakers and retired people, the type of people who go to bake sales, and then you have the zombies show up and the real drama starts.
But there really are sort of burned out, shambling, killing machines amongst us. I mean, Brendan calls him Dad. I call him one of my best friends. I mean, there really are people like that, Will. We know them.
But you make a good point. When I do one-offs and I have my players roll up characters for that one-off, if I tell them what that one-off is going to be, they'll just throw all of their skill points, all of their feats into a thing to optimize them for that. Just as you said, they will optimize themselves. And it'll be an unviable character for anything else. That human being, that creature, whatever it is, would never exist in the real world because lots of things can happen to you, not necessarily just this one scenario. So yeah, the concept of telling them what the campaign or session is going to be about, having them build characters and then fish out of water, take them out of that situation, put them in something else, it's kind of fun. What would a bunch of bakers and homemakers do in the zombie apocalypse? I don't have an answer to that, and I think that's what would make it a pretty good game session.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned fish out of water because as a GM, but also as a writer and also just as a reader, one of my absolute favorite kinds of stories is the fish out of water story. I love seeing a person taken completely out of their element and finding hidden reserves of inspiration or finding creative ways to deal with an overwhelming problem. I remember there was a great interview with Sid and Marty Krofft where they were saying they got a lot of flack for writing so many shows that were fish out of water stories, but their comeback was, well, that's the only story. All the great stories are about people who in some way get taken out of their element. Even Sherlock Holmes, it's always a mystery that he's never faced before, and he's got to completely build up an investigation from the ground up. He can't just run on any assumptions.
But what about that Sid and Marty Krofft, Will?
What about him? Are you trying to get me to sing the Land of the Lost theme? Because, okay, I will. Marshall, Will, and Holly on a routine expedition. Hit the greatest earthquake ever known.
No more.
Okay. Because I was going to pantomime. I was going to do rowing. I was going to go down a waterfall. Ah!
But actually, aren't they the ones that tell me if I'm wrong? They also did. Speaking of Sid and Marty Krofft, as long as we've sort of gone onto this subcultural tangent, didn't they also do the HR Puffin Stuff show? Wasn't that them?
Yes, they did HR Puffin Stuff, Lidsville, Professor Drinker, Electra Woman and Dyna Girl.
A lot of really overt drug culture kind of shit. And we look back today, and it's called Lidsville, man. And everyone's like a hat, dude. Really? This was for kids? Nobody knew this was a drug culture thing? How did they not know this?
Well, actually, here's a fun story. Here's a fun story about deceptions and bait and switch. So you can read about this in David B. and Cooley's book, Dangerously Funny, which is a history of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. So behind the scenes of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, the network censors were ridiculously paranoid that they were going to sneak drug references into the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. So every Monday, before anyone from the network came to the writer's room, Dickie Smothers would say, okay, here's the deal. For the rest of the week, I'm going to give you a phrase. Act like that phrase is a drug reference. And it would just be some nonsense phrase, but the writers and producers would use it as if it was a drug reference. So then he would put that phrase in a script, specifically so the network guy could go, you can't say we're rowing to Galveston. That's a marijuana reference. And so they go, okay, we'll cut that, no questions asked. And then the actual
I think it's 420 somewhere. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, go ahead. You're fine.
Yeah. Then any actual counterculture reference would get through because that wasn't what they were looking for.
Right. Clever.
That does bring everything back around to misdirection. Will, very, very elegant. I approve.
Absolutely, I love that kind of thing.
You redirected us to misdirection.
And you know, it's a great part. And the best part is you don't even know that it's happened until it's too late. And that's actually another kind of misdirection and deception I wanted to talk about is the Magician's Gambit. Are you all familiar with this?
I am, but go ahead.
It's the whole idea is that you give the mark a choice without actually giving them a choice.
Sure.
You know, and you like just a real like basic example. Let's say there's some powerful being in the game that's going to call down doom, and on one side you've got like the villain who's been dogging the adventurer's heels the whole time, and on the other side you've got like the cleric's mother, and the powerful you're going to kill the cleric's mother, and so the oracle simply says, choose, and of course, he's going to pronounce doom. I choose the villain, and the oracle goes, very well, the villain shall be spared, and you call down doom on the mother. But if they said, he's obviously asking who gets whatever they pick, you always interpret that result so that you get the result that you as the GM had planned.
Isn't this sort of the sub-theme of every David Mamet movie?
Quite possibly, although not necessarily with as much swearing.
Got a little more violence.
But you got to be careful when you're doing stuff like that. You can't be too transparent because gamers love to whine about railroading. So, be clever about it. Give them the illusion of choice, but make sure it actually looks like a choice. It can't be too contrived. If they're gonna whack the grandmother no matter what, they've really got to feel like it's their fault for not exploring the question further, right? It's not because you as a DM are contriving some way to get them to kill the grandmother. It's because they, as characters, did not explore the problem far enough in order to understand what was being asked and therefore made the wrong choice. That's when they start to kick themselves. That's when it starts to be compelling. And that's why I really like the concept of bait and switch in general and deception as a GM's tool, because if you present it properly, your players can become really motivated by that. You don't want to embitter them because of it. So I'll give you an example. I designed an adventure that Mike played in, so he knows what I'm talking about. Players all went into the submerged temple, right? Okay, and there's a cleric. This cleric, she appeared to be an aquatic elf. Doesn't really matter. She was actually a villain. Happened to be a lookalike of someone that they happened to know. She led these players down to do all this stuff, and it ended up being a ruse for her to get some information. But at the end of the adventure, even though they had been betrayed, even though this was a deception, even though this was a bait and switch, they still got a sweet reward out of it. They still got sweet treasure out of it. So they were really jazzed by that. But at the end of the day, they were still pissed off because they had been misled.
And it was a segue to the next part of the adventure.
Absolutely. But I think it's important there that I could have used that as an opportunity to say, well, she tricked you. You don't get anything. And my players would have been bitter. And they probably wouldn't have wanted to do it anymore. And next time we would have had to play something else. But because of this, I turned her into a compelling enemy.
A nemesis.
And I gave them these sweet items to use against her the next time they ran into her. So they're there equipping themselves with their fancy new armor and magic weapons, and they're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to use this against her. That was deception, I think, done well.
And I have done that frequently. I mean, one of the things that I've always specialized in as a GM, and you've probably seen this, Brendan, is generally the party is unified against me. They know I'm there to just screw them over. They know I'm there just to kill them all. And then at the end, they're so triumphant, and they're like, in your face, Mike, in your face. You couldn't kill us. You couldn't destroy us. Look what we did. We completely defeated everything. Man, you guys, you completely, I didn't even see it coming. Man, wow, you guys are just the best.
Well, Mike, you did something fun. You did something fun recently with the Pyrohydra, didn't you?
Oh my God, that was a lot of fun in our
It was a ton of fun.
That was a lot of fun, exactly.
Well, share the story. Don't just tell people it was fun and then not tell people.
Drink your frosty chocolate milkshake and expect us to fill dead air.
I was running a game, a mini game for Brendan and his dad, Ollie. And we decided to use one of our own books as a tool for running a pickup game, which is to say our book Encounters. So Encounters is part of the Swords of Coast fantasy campaign setting, and it has terrain encounters and nation-specific encounters for, I think, 17 different nations that exist in the Swords of Coast fantasy campaign setting. Yeah. So our adventure took place, we set up a shell adventure, took place on the island of Sicily, which is known as the Grand Redoubt of Trinacria, and it is actually under the administration of an oppressive fire giant regime. So the fire giants live in the volcanoes, Mount Etna, and then the rest of the island has feudal-type human peasants farming the land, and then goblinoids controlling them. So the characters, a group of dwarves, had to get from one point to another and make contact with this dwarven ongoing rebellion against the fire giants. But at one point in the adventure, we've got 3 dwarves riding on the back of a war beast, a lizard, a giant war lizard that had like a fighting platform mounted on its back, and they're moving through the mountains of Sicily. And as they're coming up through a narrow pass at night, they see 5 sets of glowing red eyes ahead of them and up on the side of the slope a little bit. They do all their skill checks and they think about what it could be, and they come to the conclusion that they are dealing with a pyrohydra, with a hydra, a 5-headed dragon that can breathe fire. So they go straight into tactical mode. Ollie immediately, does he use up every damn potion that he has?
Yeah, he breaks out his oil of magic weapon. He drinks his potions of strength. No, he is all roided out for this encounter.
Every resource he's got, every single one. He just uses it all up. Brendan's character is controlling Lizzie, the war beast. And
huge monitor lizard.
Huge monitor lizard. He takes it and they go trotting up the side of the hill, parallel or perpendicular with the valley and parallel with the pyrohydra.
Eyes.
Well, they go up as high as they can, up the side of the slope as they can, and he turns right and he begins moving parallel with the valley so that he can get above the pyrohydra. Well, now all of a sudden, they turn, the pyrohydra's below them, halfway between them and the floor of the valley. They've powered up with every kind of spell or potion that they've got, and they're making all sorts of skill checks, climbs and balances. They really, speaking of bait and switch, really optimize the situation as much as they can. They have turned the situation to their advantage. Well, the one dwarf lowers his lance. Ollie, who's now all roided out, gets his dwarven Urgrosh out, and he's on one side of the fighting platform with the axe. The other dwarf has got his lance on the other side. The beast driver himself is sitting on the neck of the beast, and the beast charges down the hill straight at the Pyrohydra. And they're just going to hit this thing and smash it with everything they've got. I mean, they're going to hit it, and there's just going to be this epic explosion. And, of course, the dwarves have dark vision out to about 60 feet, so it hasn't done them any good because they're hundreds of yards away up to this point. They go blasting down the hill at triple speed, all their weapons out, and as they come plowing into the area where the Pyrohydra is, they see that it's 5 one-hit die fire beetles that are just sort of crawling around on the side of the hill slope with their little glowing nodes on their backs, just eating lichen or whatever the hell fire beetles do. So they completely roided themselves out, and they just smash through the fire beetles. So 3 of them just get obliterated. And now this becomes a liability because now the war beast now has fire beetle glowing chem stick ichor blasted all over its feet and hides and teeth. So now they're trying to move stealthily at night, and they actually have a glow-in-the-dark war beast with them, and they've used up half the resources on their sheets to wipe out 3 one-hit die fire beetles, and the other 2 just go running off.
So we're out of potions. It's the middle of the night, and we're in enemy territory. We're glowing. We can be seen from at least as far away as we saw the Pyrohydra. And you even left off the best part. As we come rushing down the hill, my dad's character being
fat
in plate mail and fat, he falls off the side of the war beast and goes rolling down like snowball style and ends up taking all this damage. So yeah, we decimate these beetles.
Right.
But
I think we're worth, what, 15 experience points divided 4 ways or something?
Yeah, right. If that. And we maybe we got XP for them. We're 7th level characters by this point. I don't even think those.
It's a 7th level party.
I don't even think these beetles are even worth anything.
This encounter was probably about an hour total.
Yeah, it took a while.
This was probably a full hour with them spotting it, strategizing, maneuvering, powering up, making a plan, launching their attack, resolving combat. I mean, this was a 1-hour encounter. And it was against, and to me that was a very satisfactory encounter. That was a lot of fun because the party really got ramped up. They really got ramped up. They really got ready for something. Yeah, I'd completely forgotten about that, Brendan. That was only a week ago, actually, that we did all that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was classic bait and switch, and that was a lot of fun.
I'm gonna say that those were probably worth 3.3 repeating experience points.
Yeah, especially the repeating part. Repeating like facepalm. God, why?
And now there's 2 vindictive, vengeful, plotting fire beetles somewhere in the hills of Sicily, planning their revenge. Damn you!
They're 2-hit die fire beetles now. They leveled up.
They're 2-hit die fire beetles now.
And they survived.
Right. They survived.
But that's actually one of the best sort of kinds of deceptions and bait and switches is when the players outsmart themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because on the one hand, it can lead to those great kind of overblown, humorous encounters, but on the other hand, if the players have tricked themselves into believing a particular thing, and that thing they believe is more interesting than what you have planned, then that's a perfect opportunity to make a few tweaks to your campaign, and then they will all feel like geniuses because they think they will have figured something out, even though you just made a change because you thought what the wild thing they were chasing just sounded more interesting than what you already had on paper.
And I almost felt bad that they, in general, and Ollie in particular, used up so many irreplaceable resources. I almost felt bad. And what was funny is their next encounter seemed to be with 30 hobgoblins. In actuality, it was 30 hobgoblins, many of them multi-level, and they'd used up a lot of resources. So they ended up fighting them. They ended up actually obliterating them. 29 of them.
Most of them.
And one finally escaped. But it was a much, much tougher fight because they pissed away so many resources profligately in the previous encounter.
Yep.
And I like this thread because something that can really add some variety to your campaign is to create one kind of encounter that looks like one kind of encounter, but is clearly another. This is one I can't take credit for. This is one I got from a very good friend of mine, Cliff Long, back from Norfolk, Virginia. And this is something he did. So gentlemen, imagine you're in a dungeon. It's a generic 10-foot wide corridor like they all are. There's the occasional guttering torchlight and bioluminescent lichen providing light.
And nobody can explain who lit the torches. They're just there.
Magic did it.
Magic did
it. But up ahead, you can see illuminated, from behind, you can see a skeleton in tattered rags and bits of armor starting to move towards you, surrounded with a faint blue-green nimbus of light. Now, what do you think is going on?
It's a lich, obviously.
Yeah, and that's 9 times out of 10. That's what happened. People start firing up their blessings. They start shooting arrows at it, and the arrows just the arrow flies forward and just stops. Like, oh crap! It's telekinetically catching the arrows, and everybody starts freaking out because they think they're about to go up against a high-level lich or wight or something like that. But no, that's just a gelatinous cube that has what's left of an adventurer floating in the middle.
Oh,
it's
That's pretty good.
It's just strategically backlit, so it looks like some powerful undead in a weird energy halo.
Yeah, right. and it's black letter. It's right in there that the gelatinous cube is pretty transparent. So that's smart. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really fun one. That's one that I like. I'm Cliff. Thank you very much for providing me with that idea back in the day. But I don't know, are there any other particular modes of deception that either of you are fond of?
Well, anyone who has ever read any of my short stories, short fantasy fiction, will pick up on deception in some of them. And my stories are often about character parties that somehow, trick themselves. More or less. I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about parties that have tricked themselves. I've encouraged them to trick themselves, and my stories are usually based on game sessions that I've run. So if anyone were to ever pick up Skirmisher's fantasy fiction anthology, Swords of Kos Hecaton, if anyone picks up Swords of Kos Hecaton, my story, Bloodsuckers, is about a party that stalks and with some effort, slaughters a party of vampires. And there is a twist in there, a surprise that ends up horrifying them after they finish off the vampires. And then if somebody goes to D-Infinity Online, d-infinity.net, and we can post a link for this, my story, Return to the Necropolis. The nemesis for the party in Return to the Necropolis is this vile party of dwarves. The party keeps running across all of this terrible stuff that these evil dwarves keep doing. They chop down a sacred tree. They vandalize an alchemist's lab. They rub excrement on walls. I mean, it's amazing. These dwarves are just the most depraved, horrible things you've ever seen. And the party just gets ramped up against them, and there's a climactic battle in which the party ambushes and just obliterates without mercy this party of dwarves. And then the full story comes to light once, of course, the full story comes to light once they start using speak with dead spells.
Right.
So I would encourage people to read that. Either pick up Hackathon and read Bloodsuckers. It's on Drive-Thru RPG and Drive-Thru Fiction, and Return to the Necropolis, which is a fun story. It's a classic swords and sorcery story, but it's available in its entirety on d-infinity.net. So I'd encourage people to check that out. And I do have layers and layers of deception and subterfuge and confusion in that.
Well, you mentioned speak. Oh, yes, Brendan?
No, you go right ahead, Will. I'm not going to lose my thought.
Well, you mentioned... Boom, boom. All right, so you mentioned Speak with Dead, and that's actually another thing where you can work deception into your GM bag of tricks. Figure out where your players think the truth lies, because something that I have discovered is that in game, be it fantasy, urban fantasy, variations of sci-fi, people tend to assume that dead people always tell the truth and animals always tell the truth, provided there's a way to communicate with them. And that doesn't have to be the case. And so that's it's one of those rare cases. If they have a way to communicate verbally with an animal or the dead, it's probably the only case where I don't think I have ever had a player say, I want to make a check to see if this guy's lying. If they're talking to a shopkeeper, any living NPC, they will expect deception around just about every corner until that NPC has earned their trust. But with the dead or an animal, that is not the case. And I have dead people lie all the time, whether it's because the dead have unfinished business or the player characters are responsible for the dead person being dead, and they want to get some sort of posthumous revenge.
Will, anybody who has seen 6 starving, whimpering cats show up plaintively in the kitchen 30 minutes after they've been fed dinner knows very well that animals lie. So I have animals lie to me every single day. So I am not necessarily that gullible. I love animals probably more than most normal people do, but I know very well that they are constantly trying to deceive me.
Actually, it's fun. It's funny you mentioned that. I once actually did a game where they had used magic to communicate with the cat, and that is exactly what the cat did. The cat blatantly lied to them, knowing that if it told them what they wanted to hear, they would give it treats. And so they asked it their question. It told them some nonsense. They followed the instructions to the letter. It didn't work. When the cat came back to tell them more lies and get more treats, that was the one time the cat told the truth. It's like, we did everything you said and nothing happened. Oh, I just made that up because you'd give me treats. If you give me treats now, I'll make more stuff up, because that was the cat's understanding of the whole exchange.
Right. That's pretty funny, actually.
Which is another thing. If you're going to use NPC deception in that way, don't do it to be vindictive. Don't do it to steal your player's thunder. Have it happen organically, out of that NPC and its background and motivations. Brendan?
Well, you asked what variety of deception that I like in games, and you see, players are constantly trying to be deceptive, constantly trying to mislead NPCs for their own personal gain, for one reason or another. It's an enemy, and they're trying to get out of combat, or they're trying to get a reward out of someone that they haven't really earned. Whatever the case may be, it's always half-assed.
Right. It is. You're right. They don't even really do a very good job as a rule.
No. Typically they don't. So every once in a while, you're blown away by how truly deceptive they are.
Right.
But it's usually half-assed. Player deception, as a rule, half-assed. And you have to figure out a way to sort of deal with it, put up with it, sigh, and just carry it as a DM.
Guards! My cellmate is very sick. You have to help immediately.
Yeah, right. Oh, well, I'm going to believe that. I haven't heard that one before. Yeah. So, because of that, I like to chastise my players with NPCs that are as blatantly trying to deceive them as they are trying to deceive NPCs. Recently, there was a farmer who was just straight up lying to them, trying to get them to kill his neighbor because he wanted his neighbor's farm. He wanted the land that his neighbor's farm was on. And he was just blatantly deceiving them. It wasn't good deception. His motives were obvious. And the players saw through it, and they were like, "Come on, Brendan! Like we're supposed to believe that. I don't even need to roll a sense motive check." Well, yeah. So do my NPCs need to roll sense motive checks when you're obviously deceiving them? Think about that for a second. Try harder next time. Yeah, I chastise them like that all the time. It is kind of fun. You kind of get a little bit of back and forth. So in addition to getting players to do the villain's dirty work, which I'm always a huge fan of, I also like to use that kind of cheesy, blatant deception. That way they don't actually see the real deception coming.
Very, very cool. And actually, related to that, and this goes for both players and GMs. This is if I might quote from the Ferengi rules of acquisition. One of the most important rules of acquisition is keep your lies consistent. And I've seen lots of players do this. And I've also seen a lot of bad GMs do this. Is that the lies start to snowball and get crazier until they can't sustain themselves. So if, as a GM, you are going to have a big lie is going to be part of your campaign pitch, your campaign setup, what have you, stick to one lie. Things can bend to accommodate that lie, but stick to one lie, one piece of deception. It'll keep it consistent. It'll keep it from having obvious gaps that people will wedge into and pry it apart. Likewise, for if you're a player, if your party is going to lie to do something, yes, very funny, Michael. If your party is going to need to lie to do something, stick to one lie. Say, I will pretend to be an ambassador. You will be my wife. And stick to that. Don't immediately say, oh, that guy's taking me hostage. Like, that's going to make everything fall apart. And I've had that happen. I had that happen. Within one scene, the character who was supposed to be pretending to be another character's wife told another NPC that they were an accomplice being blackmailed into doing whatever it was they were doing.
Good.
Yes, it was good, wasn't it? I'm glad you... Ladies and gentlemen watching at home, if you could see what was happening on our internal show chat, you would be horrified with delight. Brendan, I think you're gonna have to take this text and turn that into one of the critical hits, just a dramatic reading of the embarrassing exchange that's been going on. Do a show.
So to clarify, we're able to chat with each other in the window, and Mike and I were sending immature messages to each other while Will was talking and doing a very good job giving an example. So yes, we derailed the show a little bit. I'm sorry for that.
And the point of the drill is generally to make the other laugh. And sometimes one of us does a really, 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 really good job of completely punking the other, but sometimes we just completely outdo ourselves. So
yeah, this is probably your most successful attempt to screw with each other through the chat. This is the first time it's ever outright broken the show.
We've never broken the show before.
And one for our save.
Yeah. No, I mean, I failed my will save for sure.
Yeah, so folks, if you ever want to know how the sausage is made, if you go back through our old episodes or watch any of our new episodes and you see Mike or Brendan just kind of doing this, you know they're up to something in the chat.
Yeah, when Mike's face turns red, that's typically a good indicator.
And it's doing good right now because I mentioned sausages in that last segment.
I'm sorry, that was too blatant. That I was immune to. It was too overt, Will.
Yeah, and I guess here's my own little secret. When I see them doing this, half the time I bait them and just start working in words that I know they're going to have a field day with.
Yeah, I think we got hoisted by our own
That's deception, Will.
Yep, I'm deceiving you by giving you what you want, and you don't know it.
Oh, wow. Wow. Our own hosts deceiving each other. Shameful.
Oh, what a
Screw you, Trail.
tangled web. But before we go into final thoughts, though, there's another aspect of deception I did want to talk about, and that's the outright deceptive campaign pitch. I was wondering if either of you have ever given your players a campaign pitch that, when it comes down to it, was just a flat out lie, or a cover for a completely different campaign.
Yeah, I've done that. I did that in a cyberpunk campaign setting adventure thing that I designed at one point. I started it off by making my players think that the entire adventure would more or less be them pitting them against each other. There was a moral dilemma at the very, very beginning of the campaign. They had to decide whether they were going to turn this hacker in, or were they going to work with the authorities. Or would they work against the authorities and work with this hacker? And that divided actually pretty neatly. It divided the group half and half. And so there was a whole lot of note passing, which can be overwhelming if you do it for too long. So I knew right away that wasn't something that I was going to want to have continue for very long. But all of the players were able to send emails, right, to the authorities or to the hacker group. And I, of course, represented both. So they were constantly passing me notes, and I was passing them notes back. And they were against each other, but I had each group try to sort of play them against each other so that they could feel like they were spies, right? So the authorities, the police, were telling the people who had an affinity for the government to play along and act like they were hackers. The hackers, on the other hand, were basically trying to get the hacking group to feed the authorities false information. But in the very end, this was all just a cover for the actual campaign, which was that there was one hacker, happened to be the guy that they made the decision about in the very beginning, who was playing both groups against each other so that he could just take control over everything. And he ended up becoming the main villain. So the players had done all this stuff, and they were undermining each other. They were fighting with each other, not overtly, because none of them revealed which side, which faction they belonged to. But they were constantly doing to each other in underhanded ways that would undermine what the others were doing. And then finally, when this villain reveals himself, reveals that they were just being played against each other, all of a sudden they realize, oh my God, you weren't actually on my side. You were again. So they had to overcome this feeling of betrayal. Not for me, though there was some. I think they forgave the villain or the GM, me, before that they were able to forgive each other. So there was a lot of back and forth in the party as they were fighting this villain, because they weren't even sure that they could trust each other. But this was beyond the kind of petty, oh, your alignment is evil, my alignment is good, we don't trust each other, or oh, I'm a dwarf, you're a half-orc, we don't trust each other. It's all contrived, right? This was an actual betrayal. They had actually betrayed each other, and so the emotions were authentic. This wasn't just people playing up some sort of immature racism fantasy. This was actual betrayal that they were getting over, so they could figure out whether or not they could defeat this guy, this villain. So, to answer your question, Will, yeah, I have used it as a cover for the real campaign, and I think it worked out really well.
And I've done that. Halfway through the adventure, the paladin leading the party realizes that they're actually performing a mission for a demon prince. Whatever. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, going way back, I remember the very first campaign I ran in high school. So back in like 82, 83, the player characters ended up being part of the elite guard force for some emperor. And ended up discovering he was this completely batshit insane Caligula-type character, and really had to make some hard choices on what they were going to do. So yeah, going back 30 years, I have just loved this kind of subterfuge, bait and switch. Never not necessarily ever knowing what the truth is. I mean, that's what it's like in real life. And I think that can add a lot of dimension to a game.
Yeah, it's actually, Brendan, it's funny you mentioned Cyberpunk, because one of the most successful bait and switch campaigns I ever did is that I told everybody that it's a campaign where you play psychics, and that you're dealing with your developing powers, and you're going to be dealing with other forces. So that's what they came into it, and this was an established setting actually, and it was a setting everyone was familiar with, and so they kind of expected a very sort of rote campaign within that setting, and it happened very quickly that their main antagonist was this Men in Black style organization that was hunting down psychics. And they started to notice weird things, such as Men in Black agents who they outright killed kept coming back. And people knew their secrets. There's no way they could have known. And all this stuff happened. And as it turns out, they ended up discovering that they were actually in an artificial environment. The whole city they lived in was an artificial environment. And then eventually they discovered it was a virtual reality simulation that they were trapped in. And finally, at the climax of the game, they pieced it all together. This wasn't a game about psychics. This was a game about computer programs. They were playing computer simulations of psychics in a VR training simulation that the Men in Black used to train their agents. And without the bait and switch that this is a normal campaign about psychics in the modern day, that reveal would not have had nearly as much impact as it did.
Absolutely.
Well, gentlemen, you're in a Men in Black type universe and discover that it's really a Matrix meets Dark City universe. That is in fact, jerking the players around in a Matrix.
Right.
Wheels within wheels, which was one of my favorite phrases when I was running games back in college. Just about every now and then. Well, gentlemen, I think we've had a fantastic discussion about deception, or at least we've convinced the audience that we have.
So
before we
sign off, the last one to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I'll get an email from you like 2 days from now
about all that. What was that show about?
Exactly. How did I incriminate myself? What did you do with the files? So anyway, before we sign off for the week, I just thought we'd kind of go around and do our final thoughts. Brendan, why don't we have you start?
Keep an eye out for the fun videos that I'm going to be pulling together. Keep following my progress on Little Work Wars. I'm not deceiving you when I say it's probably going to be one of the most fun video games you have on your mobile device.
Yep.
And come by Comicpalooza. It's not too late for you to get plane tickets and stuff like that before they become insanely pricey. It might be too late for you to get a good hotel spot, but that doesn't matter. It's worth going to. It's worth seeing us there. We're going to be... I mean, every year we go to this convention. It's always bigger and better, and we bring more and greater things. So,
and we actually host the Saturday night party. I am the host of the official Comicpalooza Saturday night party. Brendan is one of your bartenders at the Saturday night party. So not only will you see us for what it's worth, we'll make you a drink. Brendan will make you a drink, and I will bring it over to you. And will sloppily bang into you and spill it. Great.
But I will use my charming wit to make you think that's what you wanted the whole time.
Right.
And actually, as if that wasn't enough reason to go, it was just confirmed today that Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye himself, is going to be at Comicpalooza this year.
Wow.
So that is some impressive news. We're going to have an actual Avenger at the show.
Wow, pretty cool. Oh, and 4 of the cast members of Black Sails are going to be there.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
And I suppose my own final thought is that deception is an indispensable tool as a GM, but like every tool, you've got to use it the right ways and the right times. You've got to be able to weigh it against your players' expectations, and any deception you do, it should not be to make yourself seem like a badass GM. It should not be to dick the players over. The only time you should bring out your deception is when you know it will make the game better and more entertaining and more thrilling for the people who are playing. And that really is the key for good use of deception in a tabletop RPG.
Yep.
And Mike, as is traditional, you have the final thought.
All right. Well, I'm going to sort of take a slightly extended final thought here, and let me explain why. I want
No, you don't need to explain. That takes too long. Just go into your final thought.
I'm going to address an actual economic game issue for anyone who was actually interested in that subject, because it's actually one of my pet peeves. Okay, take a typical game world, the D&D world, okay? We all know that it has a gold piece-based economic system, and in general, one gold piece is equal to 10 silver pieces, which are equal to 10 copper pieces, but it's basically a gold-based system. Well, one of the biggest debates, and people who start this debate today, they might not realize this debate has been going on for 40 years. For 40 years, generation after generation, people sagely observe, well, back then, they didn't actually have that much gold. They really only had silver. So really, instead of walking around with all these bags of treasure, they would have just had these grotty little pouches with just a couple of silver pieces in them. And what's more, once you got to a village, nobody would actually accept the silver. And if they did accept the silver, there wouldn't be anything to buy anyway. So for some reason, there is this presumption that in a fantasy world, for some reason, we're supposed to arbitrarily pick one narrow segment of history and the kind of economy that existed then. We're supposed to pick a 500-year period during the Middle Ages in Western Europe, and for some reason, we are morally at fault if that is not the basis of the economy for our fantasy game world. Now, mind you, dragons are okay. 12 different kinds of dragons are okay. Instead of one sentient race, hundreds of sentient races exist. The entire fabric and basis of reality is turned on its head. But what is unacceptable is that there would be 10 times as much mineral gold in the earth as there is in our reality. Dragons can exist, 100 sentient races can exist, but 10 times as much gold. This is crossing a line. This can't happen. They only had a few shitty silver pieces, and you could have never bought a goddamn sword because the local noble would ride down and cut the blacksmith's head off. Really, motherfucker? Why does your game have to be so shitty? Why does it have to be so boring? If you're going to accept the dragons and the hobgoblins and the orcs and the dwarves, then just accept that people are going to have pouches of gold and there will be some shit they can buy with it. That's
Mike, as always, the last minutes of the show have been a font of inspiration. I am already imagining a campaign setting. It's a planet made almost entirely out of precious metals. Just a big ball of molten gold and platinum that cooled around a sun and now has an ecosystem and adventurers crawling on it. It's a setting where a stick of wood is one of the most valuable things you can have because trees are so rare. Because you know how hard it is to find a forest on a planet made of gold?
Hard?
Exactly. So there's nothing to make toilet paper out of, so you only have that one stick to use instead of your toilet paper. That's all you have, and you guard it jealously. No, you can't use my stick. Only
Yes. Oh.
Well, now I know what the next episode of Critical Hits is.
Happy birthday, happy birthday.
This right here.
When was the last time I had an anger-filled rant on this show?
Well, it's
the last show?
Good. The last show before that.
Yeah, and for those of you who we were actually pleasantly surprised with the overwhelming response we got to the fake announcement that we were doing a detailed study of fantasy game economics. The response has been so overwhelming, we are actually fast-tracking that for a future show. So we will probably actually do the serious fantasy economics episode before the end of April. So there actually is and we will carry over all the questions that were submitted. So we've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about when that comes around.
Or will we?
Dun, dun, dun! So, for myself, William Big T Thrasher, for Michael Jolly Varhola, for Brendan Cass, and for everybody else, for our fans, our listeners, our viewers, and our enemies. They know what they did. This has been D Infinity Live, and we will see you all next week.